Okay, over the past probably like 3 to 4 months, I've really been upping my home entertainment system. I've installed first proper home theater system. It's like a 5.1 surround sound system. And then I've been working on my home media library using Plex. And so I've been really thinking a lot about upping the ante when it comes to my home entertainment. And I've experimented a little bit with projectors. But recently, BenQ offered to send me a couple of their projectors. So I've got the first one here today. It just arrived like 30 minutes ago. And I'm really keen to test it out. This is a little portable projector. I don't really know what to expect, but over the next week, I'm just going to test it out and then let you know my honest thoughts. Okay, so this is the GV50. So this is a fully portable, it's actually a battery powered projector. So you can apparently run it for up to 2.5 hours on battery, which is pretty cool. It's 1080p and it's got Google TV pre-installed on it. So I'm pretty keen to try that out. Okay, some quick start guides, just the usual stuff. And here is the actual projector. Dang, check that out. It's actually really quite lightweight, especially compared to the other projector that I've got. That one's definitely a lot bulkier. Little carry strap, pretty cool. Some more instructions. I've got the base. This is what the projector sits in. And lets you angle it whichever way you want. Keen to check that out. And for some reason, there's 3 different power cables in here. There's like an American, European, and Australian power cable. Okay. Obviously, only need the Australian power cable. The power brick, obviously need that. And then last but not least, we have the remote. It's a nice looking little remote and it includes the batteries. I'm very happy about that. First impression, a decent feeling remote. But let's take this all out to the living room and actually set it up and test it out. Okay, so I just spent the past week testing out this projector in this room, in multiple rooms. I also got a haircut in the last week, which is why my hair is suddenly shorter. But here's my full thoughts. When it came to my first impressions, when I first unboxed the GV50, I was actually really impressed. It's well packaged and I think it's actually really well designed. It feels very high quality. As you can see, it's actually quite compact. It's not too heavy, but not in a way that makes it feel cheap. It feels solid and premium, but not heavy in terms of it's a pain to carry around. It feels like it's very intentionally designed, which I like. And I'm a big fan of this swivel stand. So it's basically just a magnetic little lock that you can quickly attach and detach. And then from there, you can rotate it up and down so that you can point it in whichever direction you want, as well as spin it left and right. I think that's honestly one of the biggest draw cards for this projector in particular, is the fact that it's so easy to sort of put anywhere and then just point it in the direction that you want to project whatever you're going to watch. And especially compared to other projectors that I've used in the past, like the Lumos Aura V2, that's actually a solid projector for the price, but it's nowhere near as portable. And when you want to line it up in a particular direction, it is a lot more finicky. So that's something definitely that the GV50 has got going for it. After I unboxed it, I went to start setting it up and I did hit a bit of a wall. There was like a really long firmware update. So from unboxing to when I was actually able to start using it, it was probably like an hour to an hour and a half. So that was a little bit frustrating, but once I finally got it set up, the first thing that I actually noticed was the fact that it was quite dim. So my first use was projecting it onto my living room wall and I had my blinds closed. They're not blackout blinds, but it was late in the afternoon, so I thought it would be all right. But to be honest, even with my blinds closed, this projector really does struggle with any sort of extra ambient light in the room. If you're planning on using it during the day, I'd say it's probably not going to be your best choice. I found the only exception really is if you project it quite close to a wall, which means you obviously get a pretty small image. In that case, it can be okay and it can be bright enough, especially if you're watching a movie with a lot of, bright scenes. But if you try to project a film with any kind of dark or dimly lit scenes, you can pretty much forget about using it during the day. On the flip side, when you do use it in a completely dark room, it is a pretty decent viewing experience. I think the main thing that really impressed me was the colors. The colors look really vibrant, really accurate. Again, compared to other projectors that I've used, I would say this is probably the most color accurate and vibrant projector that I've used so far. But again, even in a completely dark room, the brightness isn't amazing. And I think the other frustrating part is that if you disconnect the power cable in the side and just run it on battery, it goes even dimmer. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to override this. It'll force you into a dimmer mode. And I understand that they're trying to save battery life while it's not plugged in, but I just want the option to be able to override it. In terms of battery life, I didn't get the full promised 2.5 hours. Watching a movie, I was able to get about an hour and 50 minutes. So you might be able to get away with watching a shorter film or a few episodes of your favorite TV show. But if you're hoping to watch a really long film, you are going to need your power cable. Plus, I also noticed there's no real way way to check the actual battery percentage. You can get a bit of a sense with a little battery symbol in the menus, but I just wish that it had a clear battery percentage in the settings menu when you first open it, because otherwise it's a little bit difficult to know how much battery you've got left. Next, let's talk a bit about the software. So this projector runs on Google TV, which I think is a really good thing. It makes it really simple, really straightforward. It's a very familiar UI. You've got heaps of apps, you've got all your main streaming services, Netflix, Disney Plus, all that kind of stuff. You can run Plex, which I really like. But there is also one big problem here, and that is that the processor in this projector, I think, just really is too weak. I found pretty regularly that my button presses would take at least a couple of seconds to register. I just found that the menus and navigating around would just lag really regularly. It definitely makes the experience of using the UI just feel a bit clunky, a bit frustrating, and definitely not the smoothest of experiences. And I did also notice from time to time when I first loaded up a movie, the film might sort of freeze for 5 to 10 seconds before it will kick in. Thankfully, once you're into a movie or a TV show, you've got no problems. It's going to run fine. But that underpower of whatever processor is running the UI is definitely a little bit frustrating. The remote itself, I really like. It feels solid, very satisfying clicks on the remote. And I really appreciate the fact that it's Bluetooth. I've used remotes for projectors in the past that are only infrared, so you have to point it at the projector to get it to work. Whereas with this one, you can have it just sitting next to you on the couch, even if the projector is behind you, and you'll have no problems navigating, which I think is a very good thing. There is also a smartphone app that you can use. I haven't really done much testing with it, but that is an option as well. Now, when it comes to the audio, you've got speakers inbuilt into this projector, and that's one of the other things that I actually did really quite like. Considering the size of this little projector, the audio is actually pretty decent. It gets decently loud for what it is. Sound effects sound pretty vibrant. There's a decent amount of bass. And another big plus is that I found the fan noise actually isn't too bad. I've used other projectors where the fan noise is really quite annoying, and you have to crank the volume up kind of loud to be able to not be distracted by the actual fans. But thankfully in this projector, they're fairly quiet, so you don't have to have the volume too loud for it not to be distracting. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention just before we go on to whether I think it's worth picking up is the keystone ability. So this projector has a few sensors in the front that help it to automatically keystone your image when you project it onto different surfaces, different walls, onto your ceiling, whatever it is. Now, in theory, that's a really cool feature, but I did find it was a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes it would get the aspect ratio on my wall perfect, and I wouldn't have to correct it at all. But other times I would just adjust it, maybe point it at the ceiling, and it would get it completely wrong. It would get a really weird shape, and I'd have to manually keystone it in. So look, I think if you generally use it in the same spot, you might not have any problems. If you're hoping to constantly move this around and take it around with you, it could get a little bit frustrating. I found the focus was accurate pretty much like 95% of the time. But yeah, unfortunately the keystone just didn't always hit. Should you actually go and buy one of these projectors? The thing for me is really the price. So currently these are going for 1,000 Australian dollars. And personally, I think it's just a bit too high. I think if it was closer to $700, it would make more sense to me as kind of like a premium built and highly portable mini projector. But I think for $1,000, you can get brighter projectors that will give you a clearer image that you can use during the day and at night. Even again, like the Lumos Aura V2 that I've tested in the past, that does get brighter than this, and it's probably about 60% of the price. And of course, that one's not as portable and it's not as nice to look at. So I think it really comes down to your priorities. If you want a portable, well-built projector for maybe for kids entertainment or for your bedroom, this could be decent, especially if you can get it on sale. Again, I think it's a bit overpriced at $1,000. On the other hand, if you're trying to build a more serious home theater setup or replace a TV, this probably isn't going to be the projector for you. It's just not bright enough. And for me, it's definitely not going to be replacing my main Samsung TV. So let me know in the comments, what do you think of this projector? Are you going to pick it up? Are you looking at a different model? Very curious to hear. Otherwise, in the meantime, if you want to see more tech reviews like this, then feel free to check out this playlist right here where I've reviewed heaps of stuff over the years.